I just rewatched Salad Fingers Harvest, and I just realized a fact that I completely overlooked when solving that episode. In case you haven't seen my past theories or know what in the inky nettles I'm talking about, go watch my past two episodes, and maybe a few of the newest Salad Finger episodes, just in case. I will give you a few seconds to get out of this video and go watch the other theories or Salad Fingers episodes before we start. Okay, we all set? Oh, also, if you are eating something at this moment, you might want to stop eating if you are easily disturbed or sickened. There's a moment from Harvest I just wasn't able to fully grasp. Well, actually two, if you count the beginning scene with the eye-mouth plant. But the moment I'm talking about is when Salad cooks his smaller salad alive. I am not kidding, he literally does that. I could not figure out the conversation between the two salads of who they were supposed to be. By the way, and in case you haven't watched my previous videos, I basically said the lore to Salad Fingers was his true personality was an abusive father, with his eldest going out to the war, Yvonne and Hubert got abused by him, and that Marjorie died from childbirth, going into labor with Hubert, which is why the father hates him so much because he blames him for Marjorie's death. However, after watching Harvest, I don't think this is the case. Well, everything else with abusive father is, but regarding Marjorie, it's not. In this episode, not only is it shown that perhaps Bartholomew de Grice was a murderer and killed Kenneth after the father invited them to a family reunion, but I explained my reasoning from that in my past theory on Salad Fingers, and I was just confused by two things. One, why Marjorie's finger puppet is here and nothing to represent Yvonne, and two, the conversation inside the boiling pot. I think I figured it out, so let's start with question one. Which, before we get to Marjorie, I'm actually going to lead up to that first, but for right now, the question is, where is Yvonne? We see Jeremy is here, so this must mean that this is when he was in the war, and judging by the suit that he's wearing, he is of a very high position in the war, and this is before he is murdered by the father, also showing this reunion takes place perhaps before Yvonne actually met him. So, that could explain why Yvonne isn't here, but then why is Jeremy here? We see the father was most likely in a war at some point with both Kenneth and Jeremy, fighting in the Great War, when the father was settled down. So perhaps, just like Bartholomew, he is a good friend of the father's, and might have suffered PTSD from the war, making him a murderer. So Jeremy could be one of the father's friends, and perhaps that is why the father is mad at Jeremy for sleeping with Yvonne, is not because of his race, but because of his age compared to her. We see in Postman that the father went to France after abandoning Hubert, that the father had a similar situation. However, he didn't know how to settle it with Jeremy, and in a fit of rage killed him off. Perhaps Yvonne wasn't able to make it to the reunion, but then what about my second question about the boiling pot conversation? That's all I'm going to say about Yvonne because I don't know what else to say about it. The first part with Salad telling the younger one the meal isn't ready yet is probably just Bartholomew talking to the father to get him out of the kitchen while he prepares Kenneth to serve to the family. But as for the rest of the conversation, we get this.
I'll need to show you where we keep the spare towels, and of course Hubert's swollen ankle requires ointment. Don't worry, dear. It's all taken care of. I do most apologize. It's all in your hands now. Give my regards to the Colonel.
This conversation, when looking at just this part and nothing else, it seems to be a conversation between a husband and a wife in this scenario, since there were certain key words suggesting a couple, such as, it'll be fine, dear, and basically saying it's a couple. And them mentioning Hubert could perhaps be the mother and the father, and the mother is apparently giving everything over to the father to take care of, as if she is either dying or leaving. I know this is the mother telling the father this because, as we can see, the father is abusive to Hubert and wouldn't care about him. This makes sense for the mother to tell him this because of what happens next. And when they mention give my regards to the colonel, that is possibly just saying since the father has a relationship with the colonel, well, because since one of his sons was in the army, to just say goodbye to him for me. Now, this leads to one last question that this all led up to. What happened to Marjorie Stewart Baxter? Well, I think I've also figured this out, and this is where it's gonna get a little trippy, and I might go off a little off script with this, but just yeah, just try to stay with me here. See, for the longest time, I thought Marjorie just died during childbirth, but now looking at this evidence, I think that's actually she divorced the father. Perhaps that is also why we see when we look at Marjorie's finger puppet in this scene, she could make it to the reunion, which for some reason Yvonne didn't. But if you notice with Marjorie, she has no hair and she's in a very weird looking state. Now, if you remember from the episode of Glass Brother, this was due to Salad ripping her hair out, apparently not getting a haircut. Yes, I'm not kidding. The man literally ripped her hair out because she didn't get a haircut. And I believe, see, here's the weird thing about this scene, is right off the top of your head, you think of like, there's just a weird detail, but maybe he's just making with the material he's got. Except, that's not really confirmed to be the case. Because if we're looking at this chronologically, to where Salad is just, once a puppet gets a little bit destroyed, he just keeps it like that, then explain why Hubert is no longer a flesh boy at this point. But, as you can see, there are a few things from Salad Fingers that is not really affected by natural causes. One of them most likely being the finger puppets. And even with Jeremy, I mean, there was no reason for him to give Jeremy a suit. But I guess in order to fit the theme and the timeline of his past memories, it was really effective to do so because it got him in the mood of what Jeremy was like before he killed him. And then if we do that same tactic for Marjorie, this could perhaps mean that she is still holding on to that abuse she had to endure from him. Now, the reason I say this is because, because here's the thing, the father, if he does a family reunion, it's not guaranteeing that everybody's just going to forgive him. And I feel like that's the case, is even though he abused Hubert a lot, I'm pretty sure that she was probably the butt of all of that torment before he released all of it on Hubert. Because as I said, she divorced him, and I'm thinking that she couldn't take it anymore, and she left him when Hubert was a young lad. And that led to the father abusing Hubert and soon left him for another woman in France. And then Marjorie comes to the reunion, and Hubert is there, Kenneth is there, or Kenneth was there, Jeremy arrives, being a friend of the father's, Bartholomew de Grice comes to visit, maybe out of the insane asylum to visit the father, and one thing leads to another, and Bartholomew goes on a PTSD trip, kills off Kenneth without anybody knowing, and they all share a meal together. And then soon later, the father runs a market with Hubert Cumberdale, and then the nuke. And if you don't know, from the episode Cupboard, there was most likely a radioactive nuke that went off to where most likely all of Salad's family members are killed. And it's just him. And after all that PTSD from the war, and also the never-ending torment of starting a family when he probably was not ready for it, and also just the loss for all of his children at this point, you've got to admit, that's probably more than enough to give someone very, very heavy mental PTSD, and not to mention that you just turn into a green humanoid creature in the process. And therefore, that is the whole lore to Salad Fingers. But yeah, I just wanted to run that little bit of that quick theory on you. And yeah, this is not going to be as long as a lot of them. Also, I'm going to take a little bit of a short break after the Salad Fingers theory is out. And I will see you guys when Halloween comes. And yes, I am aware I do have a bunch of requests. I don't know why though. Just I guess I'm just feeling a little bit burnt out because I do not really want to post once every week. I kind of want to do every 2 weeks, so that way I get more in. But I want to cover this first, and then on Halloween I'll do a prediction for FNAF and maybe 3 random analogs if I'm lucky for a Halloween special. And then after a few more FNAF stuff comes out, I'll start solving every mystery in the FNAF timeline series again, because then I'll be more accurate, and then I'll continue to do requests along the way, and hopefully that's how it goes. Anyway, I'm Complex to Live, and I'll see you guys on the other side. Have a good day. Goodbye.